This is Daniel Poppy, host of How to Write Good. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hey, it's Baxter Colburn here from Public House Media. Did you know that we just added a store here at Public House Media? No, I'm not talking about a grocery store where you can go buy apples or bananas or peanut butter, which are all fantastic, especially when peanut butter's on all of those. Anyway, we've added a store here at Public House Media so you can not only come and represent your favorite podcast network, but also represent your favorite shows as well, too. Just go over to thepHmedia.com and look in the top right corner where you'll see the button that says Store. Click on that and you can search through all of our great products. Or if you go to our Facebook page, Public House Media, you can see on the left-hand side a tab that says Store. All of our products are listed there as well too. It's the new Public House Media Store. You don't want to miss it. It is fantastic. Buy some of that great swag to support your favorite shows and to support Public House Media. Check it out today.
This is Sam Kirby, host of Cinema Stories here on Public House Media. Thank you for tuning into the following broadcast here on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show Cinema Stories, where we talk about movie and TV news and reviews, and maybe, just maybe, we'll learn a little something about ourselves. If not, then maybe I made you laugh a couple of times. I don't know. New episodes air bi-weekly on Tuesdays. Thanks again for checking out the totally spectacular following broadcast here on Public House Media.
Hey guys, Hollywood Happy Place is powered by Zoom, the leader in modern enterprise video communication. They have got an easy, reliable cloud platform for video and audio communications, so I can schedule an interview that will automatically be recorded. Then, all my guest and I need to do is click the link and we are in. Best of all, I get a clear, downloadable recording of every conversation emailed right to me in seconds. It's that easy, so if you've been looking for your own simple podcasting or conferencing solution, I suggest that you get your free account today. Just visit zoom.us and check it out for yourself.
Yo, and hello again, everyone. This is Jerry Strauss. This is Hollywood Happy Place, another bonus episode we are dropping for you this week. It's been kind of a crazy week, but there's a lot going on. So even though we weren't actually scheduled to do anything this week, we've decided to drop not one, but two episodes for you. Of course, hopefully you checked out part two of my conversation with the awesomely talented Anne-Marie Cummings from Conversations in LA. That dropped earlier this week. But we wanted to do something else timely because in my world of geekery and pretty much in the entire entertainment world, everything has been taken over for the last 7 days by the Marvel Cinematic Universe, of course. Avengers Infinity War, the culmination of 10 years of blockbuster movies that have pervaded our pop culture atmosphere like nothing before them. I was so excited. I knew for weeks and months ahead of time, for years really, we've been anticipating this movie, and I knew this was something that we needed to address, something we needed to talk about. So once again, we're going to skew a little bit from that interview conversation format that we usually do here on HHP, and instead of focusing entirely on my guest or my conversation partner, or whatever you typically call them, week in and week out, episode in and episode out here, instead we're bringing in an expert once again so we can kind of deconstruct the craziness that we just saw. Now, this is dropping about a week after the release of Avengers Infinity War. I'm going to warn you, I do feel this is absolutely fair game at this point where we can talk about this movie as bluntly as we'd like. So, spoiler, alarmists beware. We're going to be talking about this movie and things that happen in the movie. If you haven't gone out to see it yet, and if you want to hold back on hearing the things happening in the movie, don't listen to this. at least not yet. Wait until after you saw the movie, and then join us, and you'll be able to kind of judge whether you agree, disagree, maybe flesh out some thoughts that you've had about the film yourself. When I say us, I should probably tell you that my guest this week is someone whom I've admired and followed and listened to for years. She is a host, one of the preeminent hosts on Maria Menounos' network, AfterbuzzTV. And if you just Google that, you could catch that entire litany of shows, post-game shows that break down your favorite television episodes, your favorite series. It's really, really cool stuff. You can check it out on YouTube. You can download audio-only podcasts. It's great, great free content for you on AfterbuzzTV for shows that you love and maybe shows you want to learn more about. Pretty cool stuff. Megan Salinas is someone who has been a part of a lot of the sci-fi AfterBuzz TV shows. That's her bag, baby, so to speak. And I've enjoyed her for years on the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. AfterBuzz TV show, which is obviously linked to one of my favorite Marvel entities, one of my favorite TV shows of all time, and she's just really great at being able to juggle her own emotional investment in these movies and these TV shows, and also kind of break it down from a creative standpoint as well. So I reached out to her, East Coast, West Coast connection, and modern technology. We came together and we had an awesome conversation about Avengers Infinity War. Megan's awesome. You can follow her at the Menguin on Twitter. And, of course, check her out all over AfterBuzz TV and everything else she does. We talk about that in this show, too. So you'll be able to learn more about Megan and learn more about Avengers Infinity War and maybe some feelings that you had that you didn't even know until Megan and I touch upon them here. And hey, we only scratched the surface of this thing, but it was a lot of fun nonetheless. So join us, will you, as we break down Avengers Infinity War. For those of you who are checking this out, of course, thank you for checking us out on a special extra bonus day of Hollywood Happy Place. And we're going outside the box here a little bit because we are sort of celebrating something that is pretty much the biggest thing in Hollywood. Let's just be honest about it. And that is the culmination of 10 years of the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Avengers Infinity War, pretty much the biggest movie of all time, it looks like. And it's worth talking about. We've got to talk about it. We can't ignore it. We've got a responsibility. And I said, who better to talk about this with this time out than someone whom I have listened to and followed and admired for a couple of years now, as far as her knowledge and her discussion, her ability to discuss and talk about the MCU. And, of course, I've got on the line Megan Salinas from AfterBuzz TV and so many other things. But how are you, Megan?
Oh, stop you. No, I am doing fabulously. Thank you so much for inviting me to gush about Marvel. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, you do it so well, and I've listened to you do it for a long time, and I got to say, my background as far as my being a fan of what you do is through the MCU, my fandom of the MCU, and that kind of actually leading me to discover podcasts in the first place. So, in a way, you're kind of responsible for me doing this and me imparting this stuff onto the world for better or for worse. But it's through the AfterBuzz TV Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. after show, which, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., probably one of my favorite TV shows overall of all time. And I just love following it and hearing that discussion and digging deep into the show with you and your crew over the last few years. But I know that you do so much more than that. Just a tip of the iceberg is what I've heard you do. But just
give us a little bit of a background for you and how you came into what you do and exactly what you do from Monday to Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all the different ways we hear and see you.
Well, first of all, shut the front door. You did not tell me ahead of time that this helped get you into podcasting. That's incredible. That is such an honor to hear. The thing about doing a lot of podcasts, even when you have a live chat every week, even when you have like a pretty vocal audience, is a lot of times when you do it, you still feel like you're talking into the void, or I always think of the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show as like us just getting to sit and talk with my friends about a show that I like. And if I'm doing an after show and it doesn't feel that way, I feel weird about it. So the fact that like this thing that I just do with my friends actually affects people, I forget that a lot of times. And so it is incredibly moving to hear that what we do inspires other people. So thank you so much. I'm a little choked up. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
No. So yeah, I do a lot of stuff. I have a regular 9 to 5 in the entertainment industry. It's boring. I won't go into it, but a lot of my side hustles. Anybody in entertainment usually has at least one side hustle. I've been doing hosting at AfterbuzzTV for about 5 years now. I started doing red carpet coverage with them as an associate of mine was a host on the show, actually on the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. after show, and we had worked on a web series in the past, and we had gone to college together. And so when she started doing things at AfterBuzz, she asked me to be her camera operator, and we continued to do sort of those things together until she left AfterBuzz. And actually, she's the reason I started the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. after show in the first place, because it was Kristen Carroll and Matt Lieberman, and they were the only two hosts for the show at the time because, as you know, season 1 was a little rough. And she was going out of town one weekend and didn't want him to be just covering the show all by himself. And she's like, "Hey, you like Marvel, right? You're just go and talk about the episode. You'll be fine." And so I started chit-chatting about episode 5 with Matt about this show. And then after that, they couldn't get me to leave.
Exactly. I wonder if that's the mob recruitment procedure as well. Like, hey, you like knocking people off, right? And then 40 years later, they just keep pulling you back in because you've been there ever since, right?
I have. And I've seen a lot of people come and go, and I've seen a lot of people start off at AfterBuzz and become great hosts. And I've also seen a lot of people start at AfterBuzz and go on to do other great things. Like Matt, as a perfect example, he went on to SourceFed, and now he basically teaches people how to create a fantastic online presence. Kristen went on to be a producer for her day job and actually get paid for it. So it's been an absolute pleasure getting to see, the different faces at AfterBuzz, and not only get to do various things with them in terms of after shows, but also getting to do convention coverage and getting to do red carpets where I'm actually the one in front of the camera, and most definitely the convention stuff in terms of like the Marvel stuff and in terms of the Rooster Teeth stuff have always been my favorite sort of extracurricular AfterBuzz activities, in addition to like the one-on-one interview stuff that we do. So I definitely remember the first time I went with AfterBuzz to Comic-Con being at like the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. press line and just absolutely freaking out.
I had the opportunity for the first time this year to do the same thing in New York, and just such a cool experience. I'd never been to a Comic-Con before, period, but it was so cool to be a member of the media attending, because you could be in sort of that mass hysteria, but you could also kind of walk away And I don't know how it is over there, but in New York, there's a section that's basically just for the media that is just so much quieter. There's tables, there's places to plug in your laptop and chill and write or whatever you need to do. And I'm like, yeah, this is, I'm too old to just do the other stuff, but I like the balance. And plus, just the ability to actually attend and get up close and personal with everyone. It was a great experience. So I kind of hope to do something this year bigger and more significant to take advantage of an opportunity to do that, assuming that we do have an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. presence at Comic-Cons again this year.
Hey, never say never. You never know.
I know. Fingers still crossed. And for those who don't know, we should just throw out there, for those not familiar with AfterbuzzTV, you talked about a lot of the things you've been able to do for them, but a big component of what AfterbuzzTV is it's an entire series of essentially post-game after shows for all of your favorite series that are going on, not just Marvel, but kind of all over the TV landscape. So it's a really easy place to go and kind of pick and choose the shows that either you love or maybe want to learn more about. And there's awesome people like Megan who are sitting there roundtable style after every episode of those shows, breaking it down and theorizing and hypothesizing. And it's really just a great way to flesh out your own thoughts about what you just might have enjoyed and loved.
It's basically the podcast equivalent of those conspiracy theory boards that's basically what it is. It's just us verbalizing our insane thoughts on what could happen on any given show in the future.
That is definitely the focus of the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show. I can attest to that.
Zach, my co-host Zach has been screaming Graviton into the void for literal years now.
And it worked. It finally worked.
It's like The Secret. You just put it out into the universe and it makes it happen.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking more like Will Ferrell in the Austin Powers movies. You got to say something 3 times, then he'll do it, except it's more like 300 times, and then hit that magic number. Finally.
It was rule of threes, only what no one told Zach was that it was 300 as opposed to 3. You had to multiply it.
And this is so tempting because, of course, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is another topic that, I personally could go on and on and on about.
Oh, we've already gone off on a tangent. Maybe it's just emotional deflecting, so that I don't have to open up the gaping wound in my heart to talk about our main topic today.
Well, that's a great way to start because okay, and let's just, for the record, I think we're going to make this clear in the intro. We're going to make this clear in the description of this episode. But let's say it one more time. For any of you out there who have not yet seen Avengers Infinity War, we are going to be talking about this movie very honestly, with spoilers all over the place. So if you don't want to hear anything about the movie, this is not yet the episode for you. Just put it aside, come back to it after you've seen the movie. But what a great way to start, because I think maybe the biggest topic about this movie to discuss is how it left you feeling, how that ending, especially, how everything turned out, how it might have affected you or maybe did not affect you. And I think that it's different for different people, but it sounds like you were hit pretty hard.
I even just amongst my friends that I've talked to, the emotional reactions have been varied. There have been people I've talked to who felt exactly the same way I did, and there were other people who felt cheated, like that the third act actually really let them down in terms of emotional payoff. And I would disagree with that assessment, but that's just me. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. I can't get mad at you if a thing that made me feel something did not make you feel something, and vice versa. But for me personally, I think my co-host Jesse kind of put it best when we were talking briefly about it. Is he said, "I've never seen anything quite like this. This is the culmination of 10 years of movies. This isn't really a movie in and of itself. It's the climax to the first part of the climax to the 16 movie length movie we've been watching for 10 years. For me, I don't know if you're very fond of expletives on your podcast. I will say that there was definitely a moment towards the end where I screamed an expletive in my head because I did not particularly care for seeing young Peter Parker suffer and die. That was not something that I particularly enjoyed watching. I think it's great because we'll get into why I think it's great later. But like I did say "F you" movie in my head. When the movie, I'll talk about, you talked about how everybody had different reactions. I had one friend, Kristen Carroll, actually, when the title came up and the dust blew away, she yelled out loud, "Too soon!" And that helped relieve a lot of the tension around her. When when we got to just before the post-credit scene where it says Thanos will return, my roommate and co-host Katie Cullen on a lot of things did a double flip the bird towards the screen because How Dare You movie.
Wow.
For me, and I definitely think because Killing Spider-Man hit me personally really hard, I sat there and could not stand up for a couple of minutes. I sat through the entire credits, and when the post-credit scene was done, I didn't quite want to get up. Emotionally, it took a good while to like process my feelings. I was emotionally hit very hard, which is such an odd thing when intellectually you know that a lot of what you just saw is not actually permanent. And will most likely be retconned.
Yeah.
So, I was just going to say that's an odd juxtaposition between your heart and your head.
It is, and I think that's kind of I don't think there's a lot of debate about the future of a lot of the characters whom we saw disappear in front of our eyes at the beginning or at the end of this movie. I think most people are of the common belief that we will be seeing those characters again one way or the other, quite frankly, from a business perspective. But I think it really does kind of depend maybe on the emotional makeup of us individually, whether we can kind of ignore that side of things, the logical side of things, and we're really, truly, I guess, all in on the emotion that they were giving us, because it was, it's undeniable that those closing moments were so heavy and so well done. And, Peter Parker saying, I don't want to go.
My heart.
It's like it just takes you back to, he's a kid who's dying, essentially, like forget about the superhero stuff. And it was created to be a tragic final few moments there. And I think it just, everyone takes it differently. My personal belief is that we're almost going to be retconning ourselves in a year when we see the next movie. And I think what that next movie holds in store for us is going to affect the way we look at what happened in this movie.
Definitely. I definitely agree with you in that regard, because for a lot of people, it's the emotional journey, not necessarily the destination. And, for a lot of people who aren't as familiar with sort of the business side of things, and they just sort of look at this at face value, I feel like that has been a lot of the consensus, is like, it ended in a dark place, but man, what a ride. It's definitely there's something to be said, though, about the journey versus the destination sort of argument, because we all kind of know where this is going, but we don't quite know how they're going to get us there. And that's sort of where the fun, I think, is going to come from over the next year of theorizing and things like that. And I hope they stick the landing, because I've definitely been one of those people who, when something doesn't end well, it does sully the rest of what came before it. That being said, again, because this is the culmination of 10 years of work, I don't think they're going to skip on the landing. I really do think that they're going to make the follow-up film something worth the payoff.
Yeah, and I mean, my understanding is that these movies were essentially done kind of back to back with sort of a singular vision you would have to believe in mind. So I don't think it's a matter of any sort of drop in attention or quality or anything. I feel like these two movies together in the end are going to represent one cinematic vision that we just have to wait a whole freaking year to see the second half of.
Yeah. I will. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's interesting, the too soon comment that you mentioned. I think back when I was a kid, I had a birthday party where you take a few of your friends to the movies, you get some pizza, and I decided to go see Back to the Future 2. And I remember being very angry, feeling very cheated at the end of that movie, because in my eyes as a kid, I'm like, well, we didn't really get an ending. It literally said to be continued on the screen. Like, I paid for a whole movie and it should have an ending. And I felt ripped off. This movie, I mean, you get over 2.5 hours of just insanity. Probably the biggest movie, most crowded movie, although so well done, ever. There's no way you could feel ripped off regardless of the ending. You got a lot of movie here.
You did. It was packed full of unique character interactions, entertaining moments. Even if you didn't really like where it ended, or if you feel like it's a sort of cheap ending because, Marvel, Death and Marvel are sort of an interesting relationship. But you're absolutely right. I did not feel cheated in any way, shape, or form. I feel like this it might have been half a movie, but man, was it a really good first half of a movie. And I actually appreciate, as much as a pet peeve as it is of mine, when what should be one movie gets broken up into two, or in some cases 3, The Hobbit, I'm looking in your direction. For a lot of times, because of what Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows did, all those years ago, that kind of kickstarted this trend of turning book adaptations into 2 movies when really they didn't need to be. And this is one of those movies where, when they initially announced that it was going to be Infinity War Part 1 and 2, I rolled my eyes. I was like, really? Not you too, Marvel. But fast forward to 2018 and me sitting in that theater stunned. I have to say, I commend them for sticking to their guns and their vision, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Okay, I'm going to ask you something now, Megan, because I know that you're emotionally very wrapped up into this. I know you've got a big heart. And so I'm going to ask you a question as honestly as possible, as both somebody who cares about these characters and also as a fan of the movies and the genre in general. What do you hope to be the resolution of the next movie as far as who ends up alive versus who does not? Because we saw a lot of people go down in this movie, most of them at the end of the movie due to that snap of the fingers from Thanos, but also a couple of other deaths throughout the movie before that. Do you want there to be an entire comprehensive resurrection of all these characters that were lost? or are you looking for some sort of middle ground?
Yeah, talking about the juxtaposition between head and heart, intellectually, I'm like, some people should stay dead because actions need to have consequences, and that's something that I talk about when I talk about a lot of other shows, like particularly like Attack on Titan and even Ash vs. Evil Dead, which just recently wrapped up. I like seeing media where actions have consequences, where they introduce these dramatic elements and they mean something. Like if a character does something wrong, it's nice to see when there are repercussions as opposed to it just getting sort of hand waved away. Because there's no plan or rhyme or reason to what the show is doing. So intellectually, I definitely conceptually think that death needs to have consequences, that it needs to be permanent. It needs to exist for stakes to continue to be something with dramatic importance, with emotional weight to them. However, then there's the part of me that's like, no, bring back everyone. Everyone deserves a happy ending. They're wonderful. Chris Evans is great. Everybody, including myself, thought he was going to die in this movie. Maybe he doesn't deserve to die. Maybe he gets to live and just pass the mantle on to Bucky or Sam. Maybe no one needs to die. Maybe this can be like that one episode of Doctor Who where everyone got to live that one time.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me, and I'm right there with you. And sort of the idea of, we love all these characters. Everybody in the MCU, for the most part, has become a well fleshed out character that we've enjoyed, for the most part, over multiple movies, since everyone is so established. But it's gonna feel really, really cheap if everybody comes back, because that just negates the really unique darkness of what this movie brought to the table. Yeah. And how do you believe, if nobody is down for the count for good here, how do we ever believe any of those heavy consequences again when they continue on?
That was actually one of the big critiques about the show, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., just as a concept. A big critique of it, in terms of bringing Coulson back to life, was that it cheapened death in the Marvel Universe universally. And I would actually disagree. I'm like, anybody who watches the show knows how devastating those consequences actually were for Coulson as a character, and how psychologically it tortured him for several seasons. And so that, it's not like it didn't have consequences, but I understand the critique of like, oh, well, now that they brought this character back, literally anyone can come back. And that's sort of the problem that we have here with Infinity War. We know that they need to do another Black Panther movie. That's already been greenlit. We know that there's another Spider-Man movie coming. Mm-hmm. It's, as you pointed out, it just makes good business sense. So it's one of those things where, like I said, it really depends on how well the next movie is executed. And if whatever the resolution, whether they do find some sort of middle ground, or whether they allow everyone to live, or whether, God forbid, everybody actually does stay dead and we just happen to defeat Thanos. I don't think that's I don't think that's what's going to happen, but that is an option. Right. I feel like whatever choice they make, it's not going to feel as cheap as it does on paper or conceptually at this stage. I feel like if Cap gets to live and gets to pass off the mantle while he rides into the sunset, I feel like that, depending on how it's done, is a satisfying ending for that character. Yeah. That way, Chris Evans is done with his contract and he can walk away from the character without an icon being murdered.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And, that would be something. Yeah, I think I'm with you in that. I think we both collectively have faith that whatever happens is not going to be, they've had enough time and enough, enough, obviously, vision pardon the expression, to really understand what they need to do to make this not cheap, to make this powerful, and to understand how big of a deal this culmination is of 10 years, even if things do change and become totally different in the MCU afterwards. It's going to be, I think, it's going to be a satisfying situation in a year, one way or the other. I don't think it's going to be the cheap way out, so to speak. I think there's going to be some good news. I think there's going to be some bad news as far as the characters we like and we don't. But we also have to remember, not only are half of our favorite characters gone, essentially half of the world is gone.
So, half of the universe.
Yeah.
Not limited to Earth.
And so it's good. I mean, it's a total mind blower at this point, going back to an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and everything else. I mean, theoretically, I don't know what kind of time span is supposed to happen between this and next year's movie, but there should be a lot of other MCU entities that should show the results of this and be affected by this. And we really don't know how that's going to be displayed yet. We know that Ant-Man essentially is going to take place before this movie, so they're in the clear. We know that Captain Marvel.
Yep.
Yeah, that's retro, so that's all good on the big screen. But as far as the TV stuff goes, if Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is back next year, what are we going to see?
Well, it's not just Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And it's funny that you bring that up, because my Twitter notifications are already filled with people sending me articles talking about how now that Infinity War is out, and now that most everyone has seen it, now that the television side of Marvel's cinematic universe needs to step it up and actively participate a little bit more in the larger world. And on the one hand, there's part of me that agrees, because as I mentioned before, actions need consequences. You can't necessarily show me Thanos destroying half the universe and then I sit down and watch like one of the Netflix shows and just everyone is going about their day like nothing happened. Or even the scenes in Infinity War where they're in New York, I'm like, I wonder where Jessica Jones is at right now. I wonder what Luke Cage is doing. I hope Hell's Kitchen is okay. Is Matt Murdock still dead? Hard to tell. Spoilers, I guess. And no one cares what Iron Fist is doing. Danny, just stay out of the Avengers way, please, for the love of God. But so I absolutely think that in terms of that, actions need to have consequences. However, it's been very apparent for several years now that the television side of Marvel and the movie side of Marvel don't always see eye to eye. And by don't always see eye to eye, I mean, I don't think they speak to each other. I don't think they're on speaking terms. I think they actively hate one another. And in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I feel like is the one show that really walks that line the best, because that's how it was advertised. It was always advertised as it's all connected. And even in the earlier seasons, Thor, the Dark World happened, and, there's S.H.I.E.L.D. cleaning up the mess. And during Civil War, you see Coulson watching TV and hearing about the death of Peggy Carter. And it's one of those things where S.H.I.E.L.D., more than any of the other Marvel television properties at this point, has always gone that extra mile to incorporate the rest of the universe. Even if it's just a head nod, even if it's just a news blurb. That's always the show that makes the effort. All the other shows will do nothing more than maybe a quick blurb or a mention of New York. So it's interesting to see what, and to speculate what the television universe is going to do. However, I also think that's a little bit unfair because the movie side of things and the TV side of things have just refused to work with one another, because I don't necessarily feel like season 2 of Jessica Jones needs to be beholden to, whatever happens in Ant-Man.
Right. And the thing about that, I mean, and I am with you in that I would love to see a lot more synergy. I would like to see it all actually connected again, as I think they made a lot more effort to do back when there was a lot less to connect. But when you think about the Netflix shows, you also have to remember that they kind of exist in almost a time vacuum. I mean, they are released and dropped all in one day, and then they are binge watched heavily for about a week or so, but then they're sort of almost evergreen. So in a way, it makes sense that it would be harder to match them up to the timeline of when the movies come out, or even as Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. comes out, or when it's broadcast, because they don't really exist in a schedule like that. People watch them on their own time. So like, what timeline or what part of that timeline would they be beholden to? It's almost limiting, one would think, to attach them to anything time sensitive.
Absolutely, with the exception of each other.
Right.
Like I will go ahead and readily admit that I'm still working my way through season 2 of Jessica Jones, and I still have not sat down and watched The Punisher yet. It took me a long time before I got around to a lot of the Netflix shows because I was just so busy. And so there would be times I'm sitting on the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. after show, and they start talking about stuff that happened in Daredevil, and I was like, that sounds like a thing that probably happened. Or everybody else got to see Luke Cage about a week before I did, before I actually sat down, and we got a nod to Luke Cage in an episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. last season with a type of weapon that was fired at Director Mace. And, of course, my cohorts immediately recognized it. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? So you absolutely bring up a good point in sort of the timeless nature of those properties. But, yeah, at least outside of Netflix or their particular broadcast show. And, yeah, it's sort of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is beginning to have the exact same problem as most comic book universes have, on the actual page too. It begins to get so widespread, and you need to have read so many different things across so many different series that it's very difficult for a newcomer to sort of jump in and figure out what's going on, or if you can follow it intellectually to actually feel the emotional consequences of what's going on. I'll give you a perfect example. In the Ultimates universe, when they killed off Peter Parker to bring in Miles Morales, I jumped in to that particular arc, not having read a lot of the stuff building up to it. So when Peter Parker actually died, I'm like, I don't believe it. And I felt nothing. And they actually did permanently kill off the character. And then when I realized that, I was like, oh my God, they actually did it. Like, I had the emotional payoff like way later. And by that point, it wasn't at all what the authorial intent was.
Right.
So it's a lot when you're asking your audience to do homework in order to get the emotional payoff of what's happening. But if you have already put in that sort of emotional and time investment, then what is given to you is a huge treat.
Absolutely. And I think that Infinity War is a perfect example of that. They did not give a crap, quite frankly, if you have seen these past movies or not. They expect that all of us came into that movie, for the most part, with guns blazing and understanding everything there is to know about most of these characters and what make them tick, because that movie did not slow down for a second to give us a whole lot of backstory with so much going on. And I was curious to get your opinion on this. With all the characters that came through in this movie and catching up with some that we saw last year, some maybe we haven't seen in a few years, did you feel like there were any storylines or any characters that maybe didn't quite get the attention you were hoping for?
That's rough, because it's such a big ensemble cast, and everyone is really good about getting their moment. That at least a few moments interacting off of characters that they wouldn't normally interact off of, that like it's hard to say that someone in the entire grand scheme of things didn't get their due. There was some talk actually on social media today about a deleted scene in Infinity War in which Okoye talks about her relationship, and I didn't get the full details of the scene, but a lot of people, when they heard about it, were like, "You deleted an Okoye scene? No, don't do that!" Like that robs her of what would have been a very emotionally powerful moment. And so I'm not gonna complain about more Denai Guerrera. So yes, absolutely, another few minutes wouldn't have hurt the movie.
Right. Well,
I will never complain about more Okoye. But so I understand, but as far as what was actually presented in the movie, and maybe I would feel differently if I went back and rewatched it, because so much of it was just an emotional roller coaster of it was a thrill ride, but then also I was bracing myself for the inevitable end. Like every time somebody got hit, like I was fully expecting that they could die in that given moment. So I was definitely bracing myself throughout the whole movie. That being said, I don't think anyone really got cheated or shortchanged. The only people I would say that about is like I look around at the beginning of the movie and I'm like, maybe Loki didn't get a ton of time, but like killing him off and Heimdall off was a statement that the movie was making about the type of movie you're about to see. You know what? Yeah, I'll complain. I could always use more Idris Elba. How dare you kill Idris Elba at the very beginning of your movie? But and it's something that that typically is a pet peeve of mine, is particularly with horror movies, is if you take the surviving characters from the last movie and you kill them off at the very beginning of the sequel, or at least in Act 1, I tend to have a problem with that. I don't really have as big of a problem with it in this movie because it has been building up for so long, and because we've gotten not just one movie with these characters, but several. But I could definitely understand being disappointed by how brief Heimdall and Loki's appearances were. The thing I was sort of bummed out about was that Valkyrie and Doug were nowhere to be seen, and I definitely complained about no Lady Sif in Thor Ragnarok as well. So my only complaint in that regard is that they were nowhere to be seen, but I'm fairly certain they're not dead either. Like they seem to be like the type of characters that are going to come in part 2.
Yeah, and I think I feel like I saw a comment in some article today about
Valkyrie's whereabouts for sure.
Right, just confirming that she is not in fact dead. So, yeah, I don't think that's too much of a concern, but I do understand. And, I thought that, I mean, as far as the Loki thing goes, I didn't have a big problem with it because I feel like he took his journey in Ragnarok, and that was sort of the story, and this was sort of the surprising turn after that arc that we saw, but it was shock value done well, and I think
he completed his character arc.
Yeah, I think so too. The one thing that to me felt like maybe I would have liked to have seen a little bit more was the reunion between Black Widow and Bruce, which is something that, we hadn't seen them together since the second Avengers movie. And now finally they are back on the same planet together, and they had that weird, awkward moment, and then we kind of just moved on, which of course, there's kind of bigger things at stake now in the middle of this movie. But still, I kind of felt like that was something that maybe suffered a little bit from so many things going on in the movie, something that I was kind of anticipating and thought it would be a bigger deal than it was.
Well, it's such an interesting dynamic to explore because for Bruce, it's only been like, what, maybe a week, maybe a couple days, because he was, he was the Hulk for 2 years. So for poor Nat, it's been 2 years. Like, she's sort of had to move on, and for Bruce, it's only been a couple days probably, in sort of his timeline. So they're working off of two different frame of references for how long it's been since they've seen one another. Bruce as the Hulk might not even remember leaving. So again, in very different contexts as well. Like, she remembers him leaving and he might not remember it that way at all. Right. So yeah, it was a little bit disappointing that we couldn't get more of their interaction, since so much of Age of Ultron was kind of devoted to their out of nowhere romance. But that being said, pardon the expression, when the dust settles in this movie,
too soon.
I know, I'm terrible. And it was a pun. I'm disgusted with myself. When this movie ends, we have the original roster for the Avengers. We've got the Hulk, Captain America, Thor, Black Widow, and I'm sure Hawkeye will come in. I'm sure he's still alive. So yeah, we have basically the original team, and I'm sure that because we have the original team for the final chapter, I'm sure that they're going to get their moments of development, that there's going to be time to sit down and acknowledge what they have or don't have.
Yeah, we've definitely reduced the cast, so we're going to have a lot more time for each character in the next movie. And I mean, it's kind of like what we were talking about before, in that I don't even feel right judging any lack of attention to any storyline in this movie, because the second one to me is part of that package. So it's kind of a wait and see. It almost feels horrible just to review or judge this movie at all.
Yeah, because again, it's half a movie. We don't know how it ends yet.
Right. But I do feel like it's going to get hard to wait for that movie down the line. But right now, I feel like we all need some recovery time. We needed some time away from the Avengers. We need to laugh with Ant-Man. We need to just step away and watch some things in the MCU that are completely different. So I think it's genius that they've kind of thrown us these palate cleansers for a while until we're ready to get back into this dark, dark world again.
That's a good way to put it. My only concern is just sort of like what we were talking about earlier, in terms of it can be very difficult to follow a comic event because so many different things are happening across so many different titles with so many different overlapping characters. I worry that bouncing back and forth in time will further confuse the uninitiated. The people who are in it and are constantly keeping up with it, it's not going to be a problem for people like us. But for like the uninitiated, like if there's a post-credit scene in Captain Marvel where everyone around her is turning to dust, like because we've jumped forward into the present day, like somebody who's only seeing Captain Marvel is going to have no idea what's happening. Like if Captain Marvel happens to be their first Marvel movie. Same with Ant-Man. I'm sure Ant-Man is going to end right around the time when Infinity War is taking place, and we're going to get an additional gut punch with either Ant-Man or the Wasp turning to dust. I hope, not that I ever wish any ill to befall Paul Rudd, but I kind of hope that if we only get one of them in Infinity War Part 2, I kind of hope we get the Wasp, because she was shortchanged in the first movie. So I love Paul Rudd, and I thought his presence in Civil War was one of the best things about it, but as brief as it was. But I would also love for the Wasp to get her due.
Don't worry. You don't have to feel guilty about anything relating to Paul Rudd. Everybody loves Paul Rudd, so I'm sure he appreciates your love, but the whole world loves him, so don't worry about Paul. He's going to be just fine. You can hope that he dies. He's fine.
Okay, let me give you my real thoughts on Paul Rudd. He's the worst. No.
Said nobody ever.
Said no one ever. I mean, we might have legitimate concern in terms of him potentially being a vampire or some other immortal specter of some sort, just because he has not aged. And I know that's a tired joke, but the man looks exactly the same as he did 20, 30 years ago. You're
right. Yeah, that is super creepy. I'm
gonna float the idea he's a vampire, kind of like Keanu Reeves.
I could see that.
Maybe there's a Portrait of Dorian Gray thing going on somewhere. I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this, hey, thank you so much for being here and for hanging so long, because there's just so much to talk about and unpack with this movie still, and probably more and more so.
We barely touched on the plot.
I know. But I was really taken aback by the post-credit scene and the emphasis that this movie has given to Captain Marvel and pointing towards that movie. And to me, what that says is that they are positioning Captain Marvel to be absolutely a gigantic part of the MCU in the future. Did you find that was surprising at all, or was that what you expected? I mean, to me, it's like they are positioning her to now be one of the top MCU characters, and for this movie to absolutely be Wonder Woman huge for them.
I mean, looking at the success of Wonder Woman is certainly something to take into account when looking at that post-credit scene. I feel like a lot of it was sort of adding insult to injury, killing Maria and killing Nick Fury, and then also seeing, the real-world implications of just all of a sudden half the people are gone. Of course, planes are going to go down and cars are going to crash into each other. It was a very good, grounded moment, a very eerie moment. But in terms of very much putting an emphasis on Captain Marvel and how probably important she's going to be in the final fight against Thanos, for me, I understand sort of surprise on your end, but for me, it's more like it's about damn time. We've been complaining about there not being a Black Widow movie in the MCU for far too long. And same with Black Panther. It's like, hey, guys, we would love to have a superhero movie about a person of color where they're the focus and not a side character. I mean, we can have like 9 different movies starring a white dude named Chris before we have one about a superhero who happens to be a woman or a person of color. Yeah, cool. So for me, when it's like they show the Captain Marvel logo and it's this big triumphant swell of music, I'm like, freaking finally. And it's the same with Ant-Man and the Wasp and the emphasis that they're putting on her in like the trailers that they've released. I'm like, yes, it's about time. Thank you. It only took you 10 years. Not to disparage any of the great, wonderful female characters that we've got in this movie or that we have in the MCU in general. I saw 1 or 2 articles over the weekend doing a few hot takes about like how the Infinity War didn't treat its female characters very well. And I kind of had to take a step back and be like, okay, put your hot take aside for a moment. I disagree, because this movie absolutely treated them well. I feel like Gamora, out of all of them, maybe definitely got the biggest shaft, so to speak. But when it comes to what she was allowed to do within the movie, that being said, her relationship with Thanos was freaking fascinating. So if I was to nitpick, yeah, okay, Gamora's role in the story could have been handled differently, but they put just as much emphasis on her relationship with Nebula as they do with Peter and the rest of the Guardians of the Galaxy. So I understand sort of, like I said, the sort of hot take of like, oh, they didn't treat this character well because it falls into this trope and this trope. And I agree, but to write off the movie as a whole because of one example of one character not getting treated very well, when there are numerous other female characters who are treated very well, who don't fall into those tropes. I mean, one of the big reasons why those tropes are so problematic is usually that's because there's only one woman in the story.
Right.
Yeah, that's a problematic trope, but she's not the only woman here. She is one of many heroes, and in the case of like Nebula, morally ambiguous characters, but she is one of many strong women who do nothing but kick ass in this entire movie. So seeing Captain Marvel's logo at the very end, with very much implying that she's going to be a big component of how we fix all this, like I said, I was just like, it's about time. Took you long enough.
Definitely. And I think that, Wonder Woman got so much attention, which I thought was fantastic. But I also thought, kind of like what you alluded to before, it's great that we're taking this final step, a female lead in a movie. But I also think it's important not to ignore all the strong characters that we have seen in the MCU, all the great female characters, even going back to S.H.I.E.L.D., going back to Agent May, who essentially is the toughest, most unbeatable fighter in this 5-year-old series.
May is amazing. Quake is amazing. Gemma Simmons is amazing. Literally every woman in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is amazing. And I you've seen my show. I complain when they fridge an awesome female character. But man, if having Quake and Melinda May and Gemma Simmons as like the forefront of this show hasn't just been an absolute joy for years and years. And same with Jessica Jones. What a fabulous, wonderful way to unpack what in many other forms of media is done so poorly. Jessica Jones does so right. I won't get into it here because I could go off on a completely different tangent, but it's one of those things where I look at Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and I look at Jessica Jones, and I look at other things like that Marvel has done, and I'm like, yes, keep doing that. Keep making me feel like I'm included, like I'm welcome to watch this show, because otherwise we're just watching the same old superhero show that I've been watching since I was like 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, they're definitely, I think that they are definitely going out of their way more and more and more so, having the freedom to go out of their way to just do everybody proud in their own way, and to just continue to diversify and to present that diversity. And that is probably going to be an even more important part of the MCU as we go past next year's Avengers. So it's going to be cool to see where things go once once Fox comes into the picture, and then everything is essentially blown up behind the scenes and probably blown up in front of our eyes too. Who knows what's going to happen once we hit 2020?
We'll see. I'm not trying to count my chickens before they hatch. I'm just going to sit back and wait and see what Marvel decides to do. That being said, like I said, it's a little bit of a tangent, but getting characters like Robbie Reyes in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and that one in particular makes me very happy. And looking at the level of diversity a lot of the comics have taken with Kamala Khan and Miles Morales, even the Sony animated movie coming up later on this year, which is not tied to the MCU as far as I can tell, it looks like it's sort of a shattered dimension situation. That one, it's going to have Miles in it, and that's something really exciting.
Yeah. And so much exciting things to look forward to. And, hopefully, not to get back off onto the tangent of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but hopefully that is part of the excitement of our future. At this point, we just don't know. But, either way, I think it's been a great ride. That show has helped to bring us this far into the MCU. Whatever happens next feels kind of like icing on the cake.
I agree 100%.
So, Megan, again, like you said, we could talk specifically about this movie, even if we were to avoid going on tangents about the entire rest of the MCU, and we could probably go clearly. But, we've been jabbering for a long time, and I want to thank you so much for, bringing your insight. I knew that talking to somebody like you about this was going to bring the most intelligent, fulfilling discussion possible about this movie. So it's so awesome that you were able to share those still fresh feelings and your insights with us about this, man. It was so cool.
Oh, well, thank you so much again for inviting me. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to chit-chat with Marvel with you.
Likewise. And thank you guys for checking us out on Hollywood Happy Place, this special bonus MCU edition for Avengers Infinity War. Make sure that you continue to follow, rate, subscribe, etc. And check us out next week for your regularly scheduled Wednesday episode of Hollywood Happy Place. Thanks, guys.